everyone. I'm Carol Olson Day of the New York Times, and I am delighted to welcome you to this exciting TimesTalks. We're here live at the Times Center in New York, and we're live around the world on the web. And tonight we are enormously pleased to have as our guests two of the most exciting talents working in film today. One is an Oscar-winning actress and producer known for her portrayals of complex, diverse characters, like the one she plays in her latest film, Young Adult. The film, which our other guest splendidly directed, got a critic's pick yesterday, or actually it's in the paper today, from Times critic A.O. Scott, who called the heart of the film brilliant, brave, and breathtakingly cynical. You will meet these two filmmakers and hear more about their collaboration from our interviewer. You know his byline from the paper and nytimes.com. He's our writer at large, and his articles appear everywhere from Arts and Leisure to the Book Review to the Week in Review to sports. For 5 years, he was editor of the Book Review, and before that, spent 23 years editing all of the modern writers at The New Yorker. Last month, he interviewed Clint Eastwood and Leo DiCaprio at LACMA in LA for TimesTalks. And for the paper, he profiled our guest star and wrote about the new film for our holiday movie issue of Arts and Leisure. We're in for a rocking conversation. So please join me in welcoming Chip McGrath and our special guests, Charlize Theron and Jason Reitman.
Thank you. I assume that everyone here is familiar with the work of Charlize Theron. If you're not, you're probably in the wrong auditorium. Our other guest tonight is not as good looking as Charlize Theron. But he is.
That's not true.
Thank you.
But he is a person of accomplishment all the same.
That's how one achieves accomplishments, by knowing they're not as attractive. They're like, I better do something.
We'll get to the new movie in a minute, but
I'm not sure how much experience you have with beautiful women, but
where I was going with this was I was thinking this morning that in some ways you two are complete opposites, not only in the obvious ways, but
wow.
but Charlize.
New York's a tough town.
Charlize, you are, in movie terms, you are or were anyway an outsider. I mean, you came to this country from South Africa. When I interviewed you for the paper a few months ago, you said you wanted to be a dancer, and that.
And what did I say to you? When you say it like that, it sounds like I was a stripper.
Sorry.
How quickly you forget.
I know. I'm sorry. A ballerina.
Ballerina.
Right. And.
Thank you.
And when you went out to Hollywood, you said you really didn't know what you were doing, that you were kind of making up as you go along. What I wonder now, and I should have asked you then, in a way, is that maybe an advantage?
Yeah. Yeah, I think I was young. I think there's a naivete that played to my advantage. I think when I look at what I know now and how I kind of came about where I am now, it's way more frightening thinking about it as a 36-year-old now than it was as a 19-year-old, definitely.
To me, still, there's one performance that leaps out, which is your role in Monster, which still is amazing to me, and that was your breakout picture, obviously. And so, how did that come about? I mean, remind us, was that just luck, and how did you find it within yourself to do that?
Well, I was approached by Patty Jenkins, who wrote Monster, and she was a first-time director. She'd never really directed anything. She'd done a 12-minute short, and she begged me not to watch it. And I know that sounds really kind of ridiculous, but when I met her, there was something about the meeting that we had that I respected it. I didn't watch the short. She wrote it. She had me in mind for it. She said that she was writing one night at like 3 a.m. and the television was on mute and Devil's Advocate was on. And she saw it was on mute, and she just kind of saw me talk about losing my ovaries to the devil or something like that. And for some reason, she just thought that she became obsessed with kind of chasing me. And it scared me a little bit because I'd never had a director believe that much in me. And I think if I had just read the script and kind of treated it as a fictional story, it might have been different, but there was so much footage and documentaries about Eileen Wuornos. So the truth was just kind of constantly hitting me in the face of who this woman was, her truth, what she did, what she looked like, and telling the story that I didn't quite know if I think very much like this, it walked this very fine line of being incredibly cheesy or being something that could have an emotional punch to it. And so making the film was one of the greatest experiences I've ever had, because I got to, for the first time in my career, play outside of my own comfort zone, my own kind of box that I've been allowed to play in as an actor. And not only that, I was, usually as an actor you have to kind of fight for that stuff, and I was encouraged by the writer and the director to do that to the max. And it was the first film I ever did where I felt like a real partnership with the director. And I just felt like, in a way, like, everything was possible, anything was possible. And so I think we did a lot of work, a lot of research. We became obsessed by the story about Eileen, and we, worked our fingers to the bone, and I'm very proud of that film. And it taught me that after that, I wanted to have that experience over and over and over again, and that doesn't happen. This is the first time it's happened again with Jason.
Really, that's interesting. One of the things that that Monster made possible, I'm guessing, was it made possible movies like Italian Job and Hancock. How do those fit in your scheme of things? I mean, those were big budget, big commercial movies, successful. I mean, is that something that you need to do to keep a career going, or have you moved beyond that kind of thing, or?
I was doing Italian Job actually while a Monster was offered to me.
Oh, okay.
So I was actually shooting that film when it came to me. I like Italian Job. I like the original. I like the cast that they got together. I'm not really that much of a snob when it comes to genre. I liked how it turned out. It was a fun film to be a part of. And the same with Hancock. I got to work with friends, and I feel really blessed that I've been put in a position, and I think it's the greatest position that you could be in your life, which is not to work because you have to. I think it's something to be incredibly grateful for, and I don't take that for granted one day of my life. Just knowing that I don't have to take a job because I have to pay the bills, that I really have the freedom to do the stuff that I really want to do, and to have the freedom to not work for 3 years if I don't want to. I think not just in this business, I think in life and any career, that's a great luxury to have, and I'm very grateful to have that.
Jason, I started to say that you were the opposite, and far from coming from South Africa, you grew up in a Hollywood family. Your father is a producer and director, and having made Ghostbusters, he's already immortal. And we talked about this a little bit backstage in the green. So what's that like? Was that a help? Was it a hindrance? Was it neither? I mean, how weird is it to be?
It's so funny. I was in Tribeca a couple weeks ago, and the original Ghostbusters firehouse is down there. And I was there and I saw people taking photos outside it. And it was this crazy reminder of how big that movie is.
How old were you when it
I was 7. And I don't think I'll ever make a movie where people want to go find the location and take a photo. You know, like no one's outside Juno's house taking a photo in front of it. It's kind of unreal. And I brought my daughter to see it too. When I was 7 years old, Ghostbusters came out, and that Halloween, every kid was a Ghostbuster, but I was the only one who had a real Ghostbuster gun. You know, as far as my career goes, that was my first big break, was the moment my dad decided to have sex with my mom. You know, so Lana Turner got discovered at Schwab's.
Yeah.
My dad met my mom in a house party in Montreal.
Got it on.
And then they got it on.
The rest is history.
And then hours of labor later, I had a career.
You lucky bastard.
Yeah, I've been very lucky. I've been very lucky from day one. Lucky that I grew up in a Hollywood family, but also a Hollywood family that stayed together. That encouraged me to kind of do whatever I wanted, and my father, at a very key moment, encouraged me to be a director. I was scared of being a director. I was well aware of what people thought of the children of famous filmmakers, and I thought, why would I want to enter a job where the presumption was that I was some talentless, spoiled brat with a drug problem? And so I went to college and I went pre-med because I thought, I'll be a doctor. No one questions why you become a doctor. And my father came out and visited me and he said, what are you doing? And I said, I'm scared. I'm scared of living in your shadow my entire life. I'm scared that, you know, in success I'll be compared to you. In failure, it'll be a very public failure. And he told me a great story. You have time for a story?
Yeah.
All right.
Sorry.
So when my dad, I was 17 at the time, and when my dad was 17, and you have to understand that my grandparents were Holocaust survivors who came to Canada with nothing. In fact, they survived the Holocaust and then were living in communist Czechoslovakia, and which was very anti-Semitic, and they escaped there under the floorboards of a boat. They hired a boat captain. They paid him off to lift the floorboards up and literally nailed them down in the bottom of a boat, and that's how they got out. And my dad was 4 years old. They come to Canada. My grandfather was he managed a dry cleaner and then a car wash. And at 17, my father came to my grandfather and said, Dad, I just came back from Quebec. In Quebec, they have these submarine sandwiches. They're really popular. Give me the money to open up a submarine sandwich shop, and we're going to make a fortune. And my grandfather said, you know, I'm sure these sandwiches are really good, and if I gave you the money, we could make a lot of money, but I just don't think there's enough magic in it for you. And it was off of that advice that my father was a music major at college. He started a film club, and he became a very successful director. So he told me the story, and he said, look, there's no more noble a profession in the world than being a doctor. If you became a doctor, your mother and I, we'd be over the moon. But I don't think it's in your heart, and I don't think there's enough magic in it for you. I think you're a storyteller, and no matter how scared you are of that, you have to follow that. And it was off of that advice that I came back to Los Angeles. I walked the head of admissions at USC to her car, and on the way there convinced her to let me into the school, ending with the argument, help me come home. And in that moment, my father became the first Jewish dad to say, don't become a doctor, be a filmmaker.
Your first movie, or your first big movie anyway, Thank You for Smoking, strikes me as an odd and ambitious choice for a first movie. I mean, it's not exactly a comedy, it's a satire, there's some edge to it. I mean, why of all the properties that were around, why did you did you seize on that?
You know, there was a really smart woman that I knew when I was a teenager, and she gave me a copy of that book, the Christopher Buckley book, Thank You for Smoking. And she said, this was written for you. And she was right. I started reading that book, and it really was my introduction to libertarian politics. And it had a really sharp sense of humor. And I just immediately knew, this is what I want to start my career with. And the tricky thing became that I started making short films, I started directing commercials, and I even wrote a script for that, but nobody wanted to make that movie. And the trick was that I was being offered broad comedies that would have allowed me to kind of follow in my father's footsteps into kind of the genre that he works in, but I really wanted to make Thank You for Smoking, and in that time I had also found the book Up in the Air, and I wanted to make that. I knew what kind of director I wanted to be, but it's very hard to say no to a directing job. An opportunity to make a movie that'll come out in the theaters, a movie that you can go and buy a ticket for, to be on set, all of that. And I really just kind of held on to Thank You for Smoking as kind of a holy grail. And I waited for years until finally one day, one of the guys who created PayPal, PayPal, you pay for eBay on, he and his partners had sold PayPal to eBay for $1.5 billion, and they had some extra spending cash. And they literally read the script and they loved it, and they said, we have no idea why this hasn't been made, and they cut a check for $6 million, and we made the film.
Wow.
Amazing.
A question,
It was amazing, yeah.
question I've always wanted to ask you, you may get asked this a lot, why in the movie does Nick Naylor, who's a lobbyist for the tobacco company, why doesn't he never smokes, and yet we know that he does, but we never see him light up?
For me, that was never a movie about cigarettes. And I thought, if we have cigarettes in this movie, that's all people are going to see, that's all they're going to think about, they're going to talk about. And it was very important for me that not be a movie about cigarettes. It was a movie about talking. The subject of their talks could have been alcohol, drugs, guns, religion, abortion. I mean, there's a million things that people argue about. And the movie was about the conversation. And so I never saw a need to put cigarettes in that movie. And strangely, from that moment forward, I really never saw a reason to put cigarettes in any of my movies. And I haven't done that as of yet. And I imagine if at some point I make a movie where historically it would make sense, I'll need to. But I really pride myself on not telling people what to think, but I don't want to put cigarettes in my movies.
The equivalent of Monster for you was Juno, which is the best. Yeah, it was. It was the movie. It was the movie that put you on the map. And
that pregnant lady went on a killing spree.
Right.
Yeah, so I'm trying to equate. Yeah, I'm just seeing the image of you as a monster next to Ellen with her belly.
So how did that movie come about? I mean, clearly, besides your direction and Ellen Page, it benefits tremendously from Diablo Cody's script. How did that come to you?
I had made Thank You for Smoking. I was writing Up in the Air. I had intended to make Up in the Air my second film, when one day a friend of mine called and said, hey, I got this script you need to read. I said, what is it? He said, it's a teenage pregnancy comedy written by a former stripper from Minneapolis. I said, oh, great, send it on over. And it's just one of those moments where I opened the door and I received this envelope, I start reading the script, and 15, 20 pages later, I'm still standing, at my front door. It was a remarkable screenplay, and not remarkable for the reasons that I think people often attribute to it, the language and all that stuff. I think what was amazing about it was actually similar to Young Adult, was the third act and the challenging scenes that she included in it. Most importantly to me was the scene in which Juno went to Mark Loring's house and went down into the basement with him. And there's this very uncomfortable scene where we're not quite sure if the potential father of her unborn child is kind of hitting on her, and she escapes and decides to keep the baby and decides to still give it to Vanessa. And I just thought that was such a tricky, dramatic turn, and I thought that scene is going to kind of take everything I'm capable of to direct right and walk that tightrope, and that was the reason I made that movie.
And now we've got another Diablo movie. Diablo Cody also wrote Young Adult, and I just happen to have in my pocket Tony Scott's review, which appeared in the paper today, of this movie. He loved it. He called it brilliant, brave, and breathtakingly cynical. And he talked about how it breaks the established codes of movie making. It scrambles and subverts them in ways that are puzzling, amusing, horrifying, and ultimately astonishing. All true. First thing I was going to ask is, do you care about reviews? Does that earlier this month I interviewed David Fincher, who says that the only reviews that matter are the ones that people tweet when they come out of the theater to their friends. It's great or it sucks. Do you care? Does that make you happy? Does this?
It's interesting.
Charlize, do you pay any attention?
Well, no,
What were you going to say?
no, I wasn't going to say anything. Go ahead. What did you want to say?
I mean, have you read them yet for young adult?
No, but like people are definitely talking about it, so you can't help but not run in
Right.
people.
I'm really grateful for that review. I'm really grateful for also the review that was in the LA Times this morning, which is a paper that I grew up reading. It's funny, so many people have taught me don't read reviews, and I'm getting better at reading less of them because you tend to just look for the bad ones. And in life, you tend to believe negative comments more than compliments, however they come. I guess in this particular case, what's really wonderful is hearing someone who seems to understand why we made this film by the way he talks about it. Not by the fact that he said it was really good. I mean, that's why we made it, to make a good film.
Finally, someone got it.
Yeah, exactly. No, but I remember, Charlize, when she agreed to do this film, she said, let's jump off this cliff together. And that's what it felt like. It felt like we were making something pretty scary. This is a movie about a character that does not change. And that's what makes it unusual. That's what made the script unusual. I think that's what made Diablo incredibly brave for writing this. It's a gutsy thing to write an unmakeable movie, which is what she wrote. And then somehow, I think particularly by virtue of Charlize being in it, the studio said, okay. And then they left us alone. Paramount put together a budget of $12 million, and we shot this in 30 days, and we never changed a thing about the script. And the only fear is, what if people don't get it? What if people are like, why would you make a movie about a character who doesn't change?
Not only does she not change, she's not terribly likable.
I like her, but
Yeah, so I'm gonna get on the defense.
Mhm.
I like her. You don't like her?
Well, you do, but I mean, she's got some problems.
Yeah, but I have to say,
who doesn't?
yeah, but more than, I feel, I grew up on 70s film, and I feel like, I grew up with like Gina Hackman and Jack Nicholson and Dustin Hoffman and De Niro and Pacino. Like, they got to play all of these kind of conflicted, unforgiving characters, conflicted and unapologetic. And they were, we watch them and we kind of review them and look at them as great character studies, and we applaud them. And for some reason, when women kind of do, which is so truthful to our condition as well, it's just as conflicted, all of a sudden it becomes unlikable. And I'm so happy about how people are responding to this film, because everybody tends to catch themselves and go, I shouldn't like her, but for some reason I do. And it's nice to kind of see that storytelling and filmmakers are playing in that gray zone with women. I think especially this year, there's been a lot of females who've been able to kind of do these kind of real characters. Like, women are just as messed up.
No.
I know. I'm here to tell you the truth.
The
And
other-
we wear chicken cutlets.
The other interesting thing about the part, it seems to me, is that it takes one of your greatest assets, which is your beauty, and even that comes to be works against that character. I mean, she instead of being an asset, it becomes it's she's trying to trade on it. It's very complicated. Was that hard to do? I mean, it's like you're taking one hand and tying it behind your back, almost, isn't it?
It's always it's a little bit of a bizarre thing because I guess maybe Jason has a better perspective. Maybe the directors that I've worked with have a better perspective on that. I only know that I try and utilize what I have to my best. I mean, I think that you can kind of sit and look at the glass half empty or half full. And I'm not just in this, in my entire career, like something like Monster. I think there's never been a part of me that struggled with or felt pigeonholed, even though I think people assume that would have been my career. I've never kind of let that define me. I've never gone through my career kind of feeling like I've been kind of held down or just kind of been forced into a corner to do one thing. And I feel like maybe my background as a ballet dancer, which is kind of like theater, and the only reason why I was somewhat successful as a dancer was because I wasn't technically very strong, but my God, like I was in Swan Lake. Like, you know, I was probably the worst Swan Lake you've ever seen, but like I was Swan Lake. Like I...
Was it bad when you would say that in the middle of the ballet?
This is, by the way, the worst Swan Lake ever.
I am Swan Lake.
Yeah. Motherfuckers.
I would so see that Swan Lake.
Twisted human being.
If I may say it, I think Charlize's most beautiful qualities are her bravery and her wit. And those are the two qualities that I thought came in most handy on this film. This was a character that on the page, when you read Diablo's script, you could see that this was not a caricature, that she was vulnerable and she was broken and she wanted to be loved like anybody else. And I really think in the hands of any other actor, it would have become a caricature. Because most actors, when they play what is considered an unlikable character, they develop some sort of tic, or they do something with their dialect or their voice or their clothes, and they find a way to let you know, this is not me, I'm playing a character, this is performance. And what Charlize has done in all of her work has disappeared and been unflinching in her portrayal. And that's what makes this movie funny, and that's what makes her likable at the end of the day, is that you watch her, and at least I watch her, and I find the more I talk to people, I feel they have a similar experience where they watch her, and at first there's this, okay, she's abrasive and she's doing and she's saying horrible things, and then you begin to understand her, and then if you can really get there, you start to say, okay, and I'm a little bit like her too.
Maybe you've answered this already, but it seemed to me that both of you are at a point in your respective careers where at this point you could have made kind of anything. So why make this original, daring, brave movie that, as you say, you worry that people might not get? Was it because of the challenge? Because you can.
I mean, why wouldn't you?
What a great luxury to have that.
Yeah, I feel so lucky, and the success of your films and my films have put us both probably into a position where people think we know something that we don't. And then it's just taking advantage of that opportunity to make a film that no one would otherwise make. I love that you brought up the 1970s, because there's films from that era like Shampoo and Carnal Knowledge and Downhill Racer and all these films that I love, and I look into the theater today and I don't see them. I think Alexander Payne is still, really kind of holding the torch for those films. But the opportunity, when Diablo wrote a script that made me think of that era with a character that never apologizes for who she is and walks out the rest of the movie the way that most people walk through their life without changing, I thought, yeah, we should be so lucky to make it.
So how did this work? Did you know each other beforehand? You had never worked together, right?
No. The first time I met Jason was at the Academy Awards the year Up in the Air was nominated. You were nominated. I was just there, lucky to get an invite.
Yeah.
You
snuck in.
Don't tell anyone. They kind of, it's bizarre. You get there, they serve you champagne, and then they kind of, steer you into the Kodak Theater like cattle, and everybody's like dressed in their gowns on top of each other, and Jason and his wife at the time was right in front of me, and I had enough liquid courage in me to tap him on the shoulder and tell him how much I loved his film, which was my favorite film of that year. And ironically, I mean, I have very vivid memories of watching that film and speaking to my agents and managers and stuff like that, because I tend to watch films and become this like very jealous bitch, you know. I watched that film in particular and was incredibly jealous, not just of Vera Farmiga, but of George Clooney as well, and was like, I want to play George Clooney's role in Jason Reitman's next film. So it was a combination of really, I mean, I think I do that. I like being inspired by people, and what a great, job that, and to be in an opportunity where you can, maybe have those opportunities to work with people. I mean, to really work with people that you feel can raise your bar and inspire you and make you better. And the kind of storytelling that he does is the kind of storytelling that really moves me. And so yeah, it kind of started from that, a little tap on the shoulder. And I think 6 months later, we were shooting. Yeah.
And what's funny is, and I really just actually thought of this right now for the first time. You tap me on the shoulder.
You don't think that much.
No.
Not a lot
just wind.
That's a lot of desert in there.
No, yeah, again, it's just like 5% humor, 95% nepotism. That's really the whole thing. I imagine that you tapped me on the shoulder and you thought, in the movie that we make together, like George, you'll be wearing a suit, you'll be fast talking, you'll be like moving through the world,
Shark.
Like a shark.
Yeah.
And instead I'm like, all right, can you play this really broken human being in sweatpants?
Yeah, no. There's still somewhere I'm trying to find the compliment in the backhanded compliment of like, you're the only person who can do
You're
this.
the only person
Yeah.
who can do this.
I was like, really? There's not one other actress that can play a bitch?
No,
Really?
this
Really?
is.
I am the only one?
I've looked through all of Hollywood.
Yeah. We're moving casting now to Europe. But if we're making this an American production,
It's an
you're our
American-
girl,
you're-
yes.
You're
Yes.
it. Yeah. So.
So that's true. You read the script and you immediately thought,
Yeah, but for a very specific reason. And I've said it a couple times. I don't mean to kind of be repeating myself, but I really believe in it, which is a sense of bravery. And if you're going to make this film, you need to be working with a brave actor who's willing to go there. In the same way that George and Vera had to be very brave in the way that they were going to do Up in the Air. I knew this is a role you cannot pull back at all. You have to be unflinching. And that takes a lot of guts. Every part of it, the physicality of this role, the amount of scene that she starts completely hungover, pulling at her hair, the way that we dress her, and the way that we really portray her as a complete narcissist who's obsessed with the wrong things, who is hurtful. Who wants to look at themselves that way? I mean, that's really tough stuff. And to do it without, she didn't gain a bunch of weight, she didn't wear a prosthetic, there's nothing to hide her. I mean, when you look up at the screen, do you see yourself?
Me?
Yeah.
No, never. No, I am nice. I'm nice.
I don't mean that you're like her, but is it weird when you look at the screen and you see someone who looks like you?
Yeah, but it's weird. I don't have a self-consciousness about that. I know what you're trying to say. It's definitely the most I've looked at like myself in any film I've ever done. Mm-hmm. But I don't, I've never had like an issue. I don't freak out looking at myself or watching myself. I have bigger issues with my voice.
Well, you don't like singing, I know that.
True that, my friend.
There's
True
singing,
that.
she has to sing throughout this film. And despite you being the most brave actress I've ever worked with, who's really
Not
willing
very
to,
brave with
who's
that.
willing to do anything, I mean anything,
Not
getting you to sing is just like, ugh.
Yep. Yeah. And you know what makes him such a great director? He knew that was my Achilles heel. So he did it over and over and over.
I don't think we quite got it.
Gonna go again.
Gotta go again. What sound was not? I think we're gonna have to go.
Horrible human being.
So when you sing in a movie, the music isn't there. What they do is they put a little
Earwig.
wig inside her ear that's playing the song. So to everyone else around, she's just singing out loud.
It's not quite the experience that we all know when you have the music up really loud, and there's a safety net there because the professional is singing it right next to you. Yeah, there was none of that.
We did
and
a lot
I am
of
a
that.
horrible singer, horrible singer.
Oh.
Yeah, thanks. Feel sorry for me, squish, squish.
One of the things that occurred to me when I was watching the movie is your character Mavis. She's sort of semi-successful in New York, and she goes back to this little town in
Minneapolis.
Minneapolis. Minneapolis. I'm sorry. And she's been successful in the big city. She goes back to this little town, and there's a lot of reference sort of to the pecking order of high school. She was the prom queen. She was the queen of the cool kids, and you know the movie assumes a certain kind of American high school culture. And it suddenly dawned on me: do they even have that? And are there proms and prom queens in South Africa? Does this culture even exist there?
No. I mean, I think that there's always the pecking order that you're talking about that kind of crosses borders and nationalities, and I think that's just the human condition, and it's part of adolescence and growing up, and so we had that. We didn't have prom queen or prom king, no. We had a dance at the end, like our final here is called Matric, and there's a dance, but we don't have we didn't have any titles and stuff like that. I went to an art school in South Africa for ballet, and it sounds very sexy and hip.
It wasn't like Fame.
Fame, not at all, not at all. I remember seeing Fame for the first time, and I went to school and I told my friends about Fame.
Mm-hmm.
It was almost like a conspiracy, like to me. I was like, we all need to watch this movie because we ain't doing it right. I was like, they are telling this is what it's supposed to look like. So yeah, I tried a movement, but it didn't quite work. We wore uniforms, school uniforms. It was very conservative, and we had a popular girl, but she wasn't mean. She was nice, and yeah. We didn't have a Mavis in our school.
Well, if you can't pick her out, then where was she, that Mavis?
So funny. I couldn't quite spot her in my school.
Charlize, you told me when I interviewed you before that you took this part and wanted to work with him precisely because you thought he would push you, that you wanted to get out of the box, and you felt that he would do that. But I'm curious. So you make up your mind to do that intellectually, and then what was it really like once it happened? Was it? I don't get the feeling that it was a lot of pushing. I mean, from seeing the way you two relate, it seems like it was pretty collaborative, really.
Yeah, I mean, I guess pushing is maybe not the right word. I think I think what happens, and when I said to Jason, let's jump off the cliff, there's a moment for me in the decision-making process where I have to, and it was very interesting actually, because it was the only question that you asked me when we were talking.
I don't know what this is going to be yet.
No, about process.
Oh, yeah.
And it's, ironically, it's the thing that for me is always the last kind of moment where I realize that if I'm going to do this with this particular person, I have to jump off the cliff with them. And that to me means, ultimately I have to trust them. And I really love that. And I love having a director. I'm not the kind of actor that wants to show up and do my own thing. I really love a director kind of pointing at things and making me aware of things that I could have never kind of come to my own conclusion to. And I think it's like building blocks. It's like you get to places together that you can never kind of get alone. And that only happens if there's complete trust. I think a lot of times, actors can be sensitive and they show up and there's a sense that they feel they have to protect themselves in their work, and that's a horrible place to be at, and I just don't think that you can make a good film that way. I think the whole thing just becomes defensive then, and When I work with directors and I give that ultimate trust over, there's never a moment that I don't trust them. And so when Jason said we were done, then we were done. And if Jason said, try this, I would try it. I would never kind of fight that. And I think that's what I mean by I want to work with people where I have that trust and they've deserved that trust. Not everybody deserves that. And not everybody gets that place where you can ultimately hand yourself over like that. But it's an incredible place to be when somebody says, you know, for instance, there's a scene in the film where, you've seen the film now, where I go on a little mission to stalk.
I was hoping you'd bring this up.
Just to prove what a great director you are.
No,
I'm joking. You are. No, this is a great example. It's like 3 a.m. Everybody's exhausted. It's a little scene where I'm stalking my ex, and I'm driving with Matt, played by Patton Oswalt. We were kind of driving in my little Mini, and he's telling me where his house is, and we're kind of pulled off to the side of the road, and we're stuffing crackers and all sorts of junk food down our throats, and I'm kind of daydreaming this very blue version of what he's doing, which is, you know, basically very sexual, and that he's fantasizing about me. And Patton is making me aware that maybe he's just looking after his newborn child. And it was like maybe on the 4th take, we really had, like, by then really kind of great chemistry, and Patton and I were working really well together. And I guess like right from the bat, we were kind of there. And you could have called it a night. You could have wrapped it and we would have been done. And Jason came up to the car and he said, after your last line, because I kind of crack a really bad joke in the scene, he said, just really think that you're hysterical. Think that you're the funniest person ever, and just really laugh at that joke, which is so narcissistic.
And laugh like a maniac.
And laugh like a maniac.
I think I may have even given you an example.
Yes. He said, it will only work if you laugh like a maniac.
Like not a real laugh.
Exactly.
You don't have to find truth in the laugh.
Yeah, you were like, force it.
Ha 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 ha.
Just like that. And yeah, it's in the film. And I think those things only happen when you are open to them. You have to be able to, like you said, it's a collaboration, but it is also, you know, and it works both ways. And that's what I love. I love working with directors that, and just as much as I want to hear what they have to say and kind of jump on that, Jason really reciprocated in that. And that's the ultimate partnership when you make a film. I think a lot of times people get so obsessed about what chemistry is on screen that they forget how much of that chemistry actually happens behind the screen. And I think chemistry between a director and an actor is sometimes almost more important than two actors.
You brought up process. I'm curious, partly because I just get through doing a story with David Fincher, who's famous for taking 90 and 100 takes. Are you a 3-digit take director? Or?
No, I don't understand that. And I know it works for him, and he makes brilliant movies. But no, I do 2 to 5 takes, depending on what we're doing. We do no rehearsal. We block it out in the morning, and then we go shoot it. And I'm confident enough in my actors, and I'm confident enough in my own skill that we're going to get there. And every once in a while, we're going to do more takes, we get there. But there's an amazing scene, and it's many pages, and it's all shot handheld in one long shot that starts inside a house, and we're following her with the camera, and she gets into this meltdown, and it goes, and she's talking to a whole bunch of people on the lawn, and then she finally leaves. And it's the kind of scene that, as written, has so many sharp turns in it that you never expect an actor to be able to just go start to finish in it. You just presume we're going to do one take like this and one take like this and another like this, and we're going to cut it together and we'll make it in editing, and I'll just start pushing the actor in these different directions when I need to. And Charlize on take 2 did one of the most miraculous performances I've ever seen as a director, where she, from start to finish, on what is literally a 4 or 5 minute take, went from in the house, drinking, all the way out, through an entire scene, interacting with all kinds of people, turning on a dime from you to, I love your sweater, to all these different turns that are really hard to do. It's one thing to do that and make it funny. It's a whole other thing to find truth in every one of these unusual moments. How do you perform the line, I love your sweater, after you've just said F you twice to somebody? It's really tricky. And on take 2, she did the whole thing. And I remember everyone who was around the monitor watching was just kind of breathless, because it's very rare that when you're on set, do you feel like you're watching the movie? Usually you're just watching bits and pieces, and you know at some point they're going to come together. But at this point, it felt like we are watching the movie. And we all applauded when it was done. And I remember I walked up and I said, okay, we're good. And I remember he said, 2 takes? You give me 2 takes? Last week you made me do 6 takes of opening a door. I get 2 takes of this?
I did. And then you said, really, you want one more take? I said, yeah, kind of. And it was the first time I asked you for a take, for an extra take. He said, okay, okay. And then he walked away and he said, okay, just give me a second. And then the day went by and I never got my take. Tricked me.
Is that true?
Yeah, and then you said...
I'm sorry.
Then you said that. You came up to me and said, I apologize. I don't want you to think that I tricked you. I just forgot. But we don't need it. And I said, okay, that's it.
I honestly, God, forgot. I don't think I would have done that otherwise.
You totally did
So
forget.
you owe her a
totally did
take.
forget.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but it was fine because ultimately you were right.
So, but I'm curious. So, when you were doing it, you didn't know how great it was. You.
I did. I charged everybody $20 at Video immediately. When they applauded, I said that will be $20. Yeah.
It's hard because the crew has to keep cash on them.
At all times.
She
Because
doesn't.
I'm really good.
She doesn't take checks.
All the
she
time.
doesn't take credit
No.
cards, or it's like right there on the spot.
Yes, it is like I am just exactly the same thing.
There's her salary that she gets, from the studio, and then when you look at the
side.
real Theron fortune, it comes from
It's in wads of cash.
the lives of feet.
I roll it up. I roll it up like a gangster.
Yeah.
And I carry it in my boots under my bed.
Right.
No, God, I think I don't know anything while I'm doing it. It's weird because I'm not a performer at all. I'm not like Patton Oswalt who, can get on a stage and I think some actors are really natural performers and I am not a performer. Acting is actually very intimate for me. It's a very, very intimate experience and I love the intimacy and I kind of find the 5 or 6 people that are like my little intimate group and I guess to them I'm comfortable to perform, but it's not ever a performance for me. And the only thing that I can go by is feeling, and I know when something feels right. I don't necessarily know if it's good. It just feels right, and sometimes right isn't necessarily right for what you're doing. You can feel something that feels right, and it might not be exactly right for that moment in where you want to go with the arc of the story or anything like that.
So smartly put.
But I can only go by that feeling, and that's the only thing I can go by. But I also think that actors sometimes when you're so in it and when you hit that zone, just almost like a high, where everything just kind of disappears in front of you. It's an amazing moment to get into that place where this kind of fictional world that you've created for yourself where you're trying to find this one moment of truth happens and it really, really, it's like zing, it just, it clicks in and it happens. Even when that happens, you don't really know what it is, what the truth of that is, until your director can come up to you and really tell you what that is.
It's like working with a goalie at that point on a shutout or a pitcher who's throwing a no-hitter and just everyone stays clear. And again, everyone knows the rules. I'll get furious if anyone comes and it pays too much attention or is talking too much, because that when an actor is there, you just want to work through as much coverage as possible because it's happening.
And it is amazing to have somebody be that innately aware of it, because I've been on films where that happens and then nobody kind of celebrates that moment. Like all of a sudden camera operators aren't happy and focus pullers are walking in and like the whole thing falls apart. The whole machine just falls apart. And it is amazing to work with someone. I'm very impressed by Jason because it's very rarely, I think people just assume that directors would know what actors do and and it's not the case. Yeah. But you have this innate understanding of it. It's really impressive. It's something that, takes years of experience for most directors to learn, and other directors have it like a talent. It's something that you almost can't explain. I had the same thing with Patty Jenkins, who had never made a film, but had just this real clear understanding of what it was, what an actor did and what character was and how to kind of build on that. And it's really amazing when you work with a director that can kind of celebrate that and have that go when it happens, have the cameras kind of be ready and just milk it for what it's worth. It's like,
Thank you.
you just want to keep throwing coins into that slot machine. I think that there's a sense of truth that you always have to follow. And I think that if you start thinking about the outside perspective, you kind of, I don't know if that's possible. I don't want to say that it isn't, because maybe some people can do that. I know for myself, I want to believe that if I can tap in emotionally to who this person is, that other people will. It's kind of like it's like religion. I have this faith that I just want to believe that if I'm emotionally connecting to this character when I read it or when I'm deciding to play it, that there has to be other people that will emotionally tap into that too. And then from that moment on, you know, I kind of have to let that go and realize that I have to just stay on the path of truth. And sometimes those things that you have to decide are very, yeah, they're cringe, especially on this film. There was a lot of stuff that I had to kind of commit 100% to as an actor in order for it to work, that was very embarrassing and very cringeworthy. And there were moments where I thought I was, you know, at my max, and Jason would come up to me and say, I'm gonna need a little bit more bitchy out of you. And yeah, did it feel comfortable? No, but that's, you know, what we were talking about. You want somebody that will come up and say, I'm not gonna just go for okay or good, I want great. And so I want you to go further with that. And also, you know, the tricky thing isn't, and I wanna say this because I've you know, done a lot of films, and the thing that I've learned in my experience is that tone is so incredibly important to the success of a film, or just, not just the success like box office, but the success of what you set out to do. And that really solely relies on the director. And this film walks such a fine line, and I think is so, it really goes to show to how talented it's a delicate hand that Jason works with, because tonally he knew exactly what this film needed to be, and therefore this character is as good as she is, I think, because Jason really knew where to kind of enhance her and where to bring her back and find that kind of that weight that grounds her into reality and truth. And it's not, you just, there's no way that you can go on a journey and discover, especially a woman like this, solely, alone. You really have to do that with a great director. And so I thank you for making me more bitchy.
And I thank you all for coming, and thank our guests very much.